You shattered my world. Now watch me crumble and rise in equal measure. Hello, my name is Tom Bishop. I am 47 years old. For over 2 decades, I dedicated my life to keeping the streets of Millbrook safe, a quiet market town nestled just outside of Cambridge. My job as a detective was demanding, but it gave me purpose. At home, I believed I had stability. A wife, Elise, married to me for 22 years, 2 children, and a comfortable house in the town's leafy outskirts. Elise was the creative director at a respected local advertising agency, earning twice my salary. Recently, she'd been working late nights and weekends, coming home with gifts I couldn't afford, claiming them as client bonuses. I thought maybe she was finally getting the recognition she deserved. One rainy evening during a conference in Norwich, I video called Elise before bed. I wanted to see her face, to bridge the miles between us. When she answered, her smile seemed strained, her eyes darting nervously away from the camera. Behind her, on our bedroom dresser, gleamed a striking gold Cartier watch, a piece I didn't recognize. She laughed it off, saying it belonged to her friend Andrea, who had dropped by earlier. But Andrea, as I knew, drove an old Ford Fiesta and wouldn't dream of wearing such extravagance. My stomach twisted with suspicion, but I forced myself to stay calm. When I returned home early the next morning, I parked around the corner and slipped through the back garden. There, tucked behind Elise's sleek Volvo, was a silver BMW M3, a car with a personalized number plate that I recognized instantly. The house was quiet, but laughter and clinking cups came from the kitchen. I waited until Elise's parents arrived for the breakfast surprise I'd arranged, and then I opened the front door with a grim smile. There, at the breakfast bar, stood Elise in a silk robe, hair tousled as if she'd just rolled out of bed, and beside her, her boss, Carter Hayes, in his tailored suit with an undone collar. Their faces froze when they saw us. The coffee cup slipped from Elise's hand and shattered on the polished tiles that I held up the gold Cartier watch, the one I'd pocketed from the bedside table earlier, and threw it at Carter. It bounced off his forehead and landed on the floor. The awkward silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by Elise's sharp accusations and Carter's frantic retreat. I watched him dash through the front door, his jacket snagging on the rose bushes in the front garden. I'd never felt so humiliated, so betrayed. The days after were a whirlwind of legal meetings, family arguments, and sleepless nights. Elise moved to her parents' house with Kayla, our 18-year-old daughter, who had quietly sided with her mother. Jack, our 20-year-old son, came home from university, anger etched across his face. Together, we mourned the collapse of what we thought was a solid life. As a detective, I was used to uncovering secrets, but this was personal. I dug into Carter's record and discovered his pristine professional reputation was a facade. Parking fines, questionable expense claims, and a pattern of workplace flirtations painted a different picture. I enlisted the help of Harper Wilson in HR, who was eager to bring Carter down after being sidelined for promotions. Soon, Carter was suspended, and social media exploded with rumors and leaked photos. Jack waged his own war online, posting cryptic messages and images that exposed Carter's greed and deceit. But the real shock came when Jack uncovered a recording from an agency employee named Jenna. Elise and Carter had plotted not just to betray me but to frame me, to accuse me of domestic abuse and misuse of department funds, using fabricated bruises and fake testimonies to destroy my reputation and custody rights. The rage this unleashed was unlike anything before. I planned a showdown, a public reckoning that would leave no room for lies. I called a community meeting at the Blue Bucket, our local pub, under false pretenses to gather the town, knowing Carter and Elise would attend. When the room was packed, I played the damning recording over the bar's speakers, watching their faces turn from smug to pale. The crowd erupted in shock and outrage. Elise and Carter sat frozen, trapped by the weight of their own deceit. The fallout was brutal. Carter was fired, his reputation in ruins. Elise's career imploded as clients abandoned her. Our divorce was swift and messy, but I secured custody and the family home. Months later, Elise called to confess she was pregnant, and that Carter was the father. She wanted me to know, to understand what she'd done. I felt a pang of sympathy, But the damage was done. My revenge had been awkward and public, but it was justice. Yet, as I moved on with my life, starting a tentative relationship with Susan, a sensible schoolteacher, I realized that revenge tastes bitter and hollow. The real victory was reclaiming my integrity and rebuilding trust with my children. 3 years on, I'm a detective lieutenant, respected by my peers. Jack and Kayla are thriving, navigating their own complicated relationships with their mother. Elise has moved to the Lake District, working for a charity and trying to atone. Carter's a cautionary tale, broken and forgotten. And me? I'm finally free, living a quieter life built on honesty, respect, and hard-won peace. The gold Cartier watch is long gone, auctioned for charity. But the lessons it taught me remain, about betrayal, about shame, and about the messy, awkward path to karma. You think revenge is sweet until you realize it tastes like ashes. I'm Tom Bishop, 47 years old, and for the longest time I thought I had it all figured out. Married for 22 years to Elise, a woman I loved and trusted, with 2 brilliant kids and a steady job as a detective in Millbrook. But beneath the surface, everything was crumbling, and I was too blind to see it. The red flag was subtle at first. A watch I didn't recognize, late nights at the agency, excuses that didn't add up. I told myself she was just working hard, that the gifts she brought home were tokens of appreciation. Foolish. I was fooling myself. The moment I suspected something was wrong, my mind went into overdrive. I questioned every glance, every word, every silence between us. But denial is a powerful thing. I wanted to believe that Elise was the woman I married, that our life together was real and solid. I saw the signs, but I ignored them because I wasn't ready to face the truth. Then the pieces started falling into place. Elise's distracted texts, the hidden phone calls, the sudden secrecy. My heart was pounding every time I thought about confronting her, afraid of what I might find. I convinced myself it was nothing, just paranoia born of stress, until the day I came home early and found the silver BMW parked behind her Volvo. That car wasn't hers. It belonged to Carter Hayes, her boss, the man whose smile always seemed a little too familiar. I tiptoed through our house, listening to their laughter, the clinking of coffee cups. I wanted to believe it was innocent, but the silk robe Elise wore, her disheveled hair, and the way Carter's suit was half undone told a different story. I was standing on the edge of a cliff I hadn't seen coming. The shock hit me like a blow. The coffee mug slipping through Elise's fingers and shattering on the floor was the moment I felt everything break. The confrontation was surreal. I threw the Cartier watch at Carter's head, a pathetic, desperate act that barely registered. The silence that followed was worse than any shout that I in the days that followed. I was a mess. Angry, humiliated, devastated. I fantasized about revenge, but my ideas were clumsy and embarrassing. I tried sending anonymous texts to Carter, hinting at what I knew. I left awkward, passive-aggressive notes on Elise's car, hoping she'd get the message. I even tried to embarrass Carter by accidentally showing up at his gym in my police uniform. Instead of feeling triumphant, I just felt ridiculous. My plans only made me look desperate. At one point, I accidentally spilled a pint of beer on Carter's shoes at the Blue Bucket, the pub where half of Millbrook seemed to know my business. The whole bar turned to stare at me, some shaking their heads with barely concealed pity. I wanted to crawl under the table. The climax came one Friday night when I staged the public showdown at the Blue Bucket. I invited everyone under false pretenses and played the recording of Elise and Carter's plan to frame me. The room went silent, then erupted in shocked whispers and angry murmurs. Elise and Carter sat frozen, their faces drained of color. The humiliation was complete, but so was the truth. Yet, even as I stood there victorious, the taste of revenge felt hollow. The damage was done, the marriage destroyed, and the family torn apart. I'd exposed the lies, but I hadn't fixed the pain. The awkwardness of it all lingered like a bad aftertaste, reminding me that some wounds don't heal with spectacle. Now, years later, as I watch my children grow and rebuild trust, I realize the real strength isn't in revenge or public shaming. It's in forgiveness, resilience, and learning to love again, on new terms with new hope. The Cartier watch may have sparked the fire, but it's the quiet moments of honesty and healing that keep me moving forward. This story isn't over, not really. There are still cracks to mend, ghosts to face, and choices to make. But for now, I'm just grateful to have found my way out of the ashes. Betrayal shatters everything, but sometimes rebuilding feels even more awkward. I'm Tom Bishop, 47, and by now, I've lived through enough heartbreak to know that healing is anything but neat. After the public explosion at the Blue Bucket, I thought the worst was behind me. I'd exposed Elise and Carter's betrayal, watched their reputations crumble, and started piecing my life back together with Susan, a woman whose kindness and honesty felt like a balm after years of deception. But healing isn't a tidy process. The silence that followed the chaos was deafening. Elise disappeared from our lives, moving to a small flat in Sheffield, trying to rebuild on her own terms. Kayla and Jack struggled with their own feelings. Anger, confusion, and the painful reality of choosing sides in a broken family. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if any of it had been worth it. Revenge had been public and brutal, but it didn't erase the loneliness or the sense of loss. I still remember the first awkward family dinner with Susan's parents. Their polite smiles hid the unspoken questions. How did this happen? Why did it end so badly? I tried to brush it off, but inside, I was still raw. The sting of betrayal lurking beneath my carefully kept calm. At work, things returned to a comfortable rhythm. Ray and Malik, my partners, kept me grounded. Though whispers about the divorce floated through the station, no one dared bring up the scandal outright. But every so often, I'd catch a glance or overhear a snippet of gossip that reminded me how public my pain had become. One particularly cringeworthy moment came when I ran into Carter at the petrol station on the edge of town. He looked wrecked, thinner, his once proud bearing replaced by hunched shoulders and avoidance. I approached, half expecting a confrontation, but instead, we shared an awkward exchange. He couldn't look me in the eye. I told him I'd donated that Cartier watch to charity, raising a few £1,000s for families of fallen officers. His jaw dropped, and I walked away, leaving him standing there, speechless. It was petty, sure, but it felt like a final nail in the coffin of what he tried to destroy. My relationship with Susan deepened slowly. She was patient with my scars, never pushing too hard. Our love was built on honesty and trust, the very things I'd lost with Elise. We took weekends hiking in the nearby Peak District, sharing quiet moments that spoke louder than any grand gesture. It was a far cry from the explosive drama that had consumed my life for so long. Yet, even with this new peace, shadows lingered. Kayla hesitated to fully forgive her mother, torn between the past and the hope for something better. Jack, ever the pragmatist, urged caution but believed in second chances. Elise's occasional calls were a mix of apology and guarded distance. Reminders that healing would take time, if it ever came at all. One day, Jack told me Elise was engaged again, to a social worker named David, someone who seemed genuinely decent. I was surprised to feel relief instead of bitterness. Maybe she was trying to change. Maybe we all were. The truth is, I don't regret how I handled things. The public humiliation, the messy legal battles, they were necessary to protect myself and my children. But I'm grateful for the quiet moments too. The Sunday mornings with Susan making pancakes, the sunsets on our back porch, the laughter of my kids as they forged their own paths. The red Cartier watch that started it all is long gone, but its legacy remains. A reminder that betrayal cuts deep, but honesty and resilience can heal even the worst wounds. And sometimes, the most awkward, cringeworthy moments are just steps on the road to something better. Some scars never fade, but sometimes life surprises you with unexpected grace. I'm Tom Bishop, 47 years old, and after all the chaos, the betrayals, and the awkward attempts at revenge, I found myself in a place I never imagined possible. Peace. Not the kind born from forgetting or pretending, but the kind that comes from facing the mess head-on and choosing to move forward. The 3 years since that night at the Blue Bucket had been a roller coaster. Jack and Kayla had grown into remarkable adults. Strong, thoughtful, and cautious, carrying the lessons of loyalty and betrayal in their own ways. Kayla had started reaching out to Elise cautiously, willing to test the waters of forgiveness but not forgetting the past. Jack, ever protective, kept a watchful eye on both sides, trying to balance love and skepticism. Susan and I had built a life together rooted in honesty. Our days were less dramatic but infinitely more satisfying. I'd never thought I'd find happiness again after the shattering of my marriage, but Susan's quiet strength and straightforward nature were a balm to my restless soul. We got engaged quietly, planning a small wedding that felt right for us. Without the pomp and pretense that had marked my past point one afternoon, I bumped into Elise at a local cafe while out with the kids. She looked older, softer somehow, the sharp edges worn down by time and regret. For a moment, the old ache surged, but it was tempered by understanding. She greeted us with a tentative smile, and for the first time in years we talked, not about the past, but about the future. It was awkward and fragile, but real. Later, Jack told me Elise was marrying David, the social worker who'd been helping her find her way. I was surprised to find that I felt genuinely happy for her, not because I'd forgotten the hurt, but because I knew what it meant to find a second chance. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. At work, things had settled. Ray and Malik were not just colleagues but friends who had seen me through the darkest days. The scandal was old news now, a cautionary tale whispered over pints at the Blue Bucket. Sometimes I'd catch a knowing look or a nod of respect from peers who admired the way I'd stood my ground. And then there was the story of the Cartier watch, the symbol of everything that had gone wrong and, paradoxically, the key to my turning point. Donated to the Police Benevolent Fund auction, it raised thousands for families of fallen officers. A small victory in a sea of loss, Susan's hand in mine, the laughter of Jack and Kayla filling the house, the quiet evenings spent under open skies. All of it was a reminder that life moves forward, even when you least expect it. That sometimes, the most painful betrayals lead to the most profound growth, that I don't pretend the past never haunts me. Some nights, memories creep in, and the sting of betrayal feels fresh again. But I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. For me, that freedom came not from revenge or public spectacle, but from embracing the imperfect, messy journey toward healing. As I stood at the altar on my wedding day to Susan, surrounded by family and friends, I realized something simple and profound. Happiness isn't about perfect endings. It's about choosing to write new chapters, even when the pages are stained with old pain. It's about trusting again, loving again, and believing that, sometimes, life's cruelest betrayals can lead to its most unexpected grace. Revenge felt like a spotlight, but forgiveness was the quiet stage where life truly unfolds. I'm Tom Bishop, 47, and standing there beside Susan on our wedding day, I couldn't help but reflect on the twists that brought me to this moment. Years ago, I was drowning in betrayal, a marriage unraveled by lies and a humiliating affair that shook the very foundation of my life. The gold Cartier watch that had seemed like a trivial detail had become the symbol of my undoing, but also the spark that ignited a journey I never expected. That journey wasn't smooth. I stumbled through awkward attempts to reclaim control, from spilled beers on Carter's shoes to half-baked schemes that only made me look desperate. I learned, painfully, that revenge isn't a neat victory. It's a messy, clumsy dance that often leaves you more exposed than your enemies. What followed was a slow, uneven climb back to dignity. I found strength in my children, Jack and Kayla, who bore their own scars but never lost sight of who they wanted to become. Watching them navigate forgiveness and trust reminded me that healing isn't a straight path. It's a winding road filled with setbacks and small triumphs. Susan was the steady hand that guided me through the chaos. Her honesty and warmth taught me to trust again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Our life together was quiet but full. Weekend hikes in the Peak District, simple dinners, and Sunday mornings where pancakes and laughter replaced tension and silence. Elisa's presence faded into the background. Sometimes a distant memory, other times a reminder of how fragile trust can be. When she reached out, it was tentative and tinged with regret. The relationship with my children shifted, cautious and slow, but real enough to offer hope that broken things can be mended. Even if imperfectly. At work, the scandal became a distant whisper. The Blue Bucket story turned into folklore, a warning about the cost of deceit, and the power of exposing truth. Carter Hayes faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of arrogance and downfall, while I reclaimed my place, not just as a detective, but as a man who refused to be defined by betrayal. The Cartier watch, once a token of infidelity, now lived on in a different form, auctioned to support the families of fallen officers. It was a quiet victory, a symbol that even the smallest things can carry great meaning when redirected toward something good. As Susan and I exchanged vows, promising honesty and respect, I understood that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice made daily. It's about embracing imperfection, facing the past without being chained to it, and building a future anchored in truth. The journey from betrayal to forgiveness had been awkward, painful, and often embarrassing. But it had also been real. And in that reality, I found something far more valuable than revenge. A life rebuilt on honesty, trust, and the quiet grace of second chances.